Hello everyone. This is going to be my second part of the my Mass Effect 3 complaints towards the game as a whole. I apologize in terms of the long delay between the two videos where there shouldn't have been. I just sort of forgot to record my voice on these points. So basically, I'm not going to try and make this video as long as it should be or as long as it needs to be. So I'm just going to go right through all my points as quickly as possible. So we're going to start off. Lack of interesting side missions. So basically in this game there's only about a few different side missions, significantly less than in the previous games. There's only about a couple, like basically the one for Kasumi and Zaid, but those are downloadable content characters, so if you don't even want to include them, then basically there's only about a few that actually require you to go around the Citadel, as opposed to like going to another star system or whatever to collect someone's trinket or someone's important object in terms of their race, and then bring it back to them after overhearing them in some part of the Citadel. And basically that's what the side missions all boil down to, is simply just you overhearing a conversation by some unknown race, let's just say like an Asari or like an Elcor or a Batarian, all sorts of those people. You overhear a conversation, and then basically it gets added to your logbook thing, and then basically you have to find their trinket or whatever, their lost object, and then go to another system, bring it back to them, and then you get rewarded with war assets or credits or reputation or something like that, something along those lines. And basically that's what all of the side missions essentially boil down to. There are very few actual side missions that require you to go to different places of the Citadel and interact with different characters. The only ones that really do that, I remember, is for what the hell is her name? The Asari from Omega, Arya. Basically, when you're recruiting her soldiers or whatever, you have to go to different areas of the Citadel to talk to people in order to recruit different members, or like to recruit or add like the Blue Suns, the Blood Pack, and the Eclipse to your war assets. And basically that's one example. And the other example is if you played the DLC from the first Mass Effect game, the one where you're on some asteroid or whatever, the lead Batarian of that terrorist group from that featured DLC in the first game, if he survived, granted, basically is sabotaging like some sort of human equipment or something, and basically you have to go to these terminals to continually find him and shut him down or whatever. That was a relatively interesting side mission, as well as the Kasumi and Zaid ones, but all of them were very short, by the way. But yeah, those basically are what all the side missions boil down to, and I think those are extremely disappointing. In the first Mass Effect game and Mass Effect 2, a lot of the side missions were a lot more interesting. A lot of characters, a lot of the minor or side characters from the previous game sort of carried over into Mass Effect 2. Like that woman from Noveria with the law enforcement or whatever, like that secretary who turned out to be for like the police or whatever the hell. I don't remember vividly, but basically you help her try to arrest some Asari woman on Ilium in the second game. Just minor sort of flavorful additions like that really added to the overall game of Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 1. In Mass Effect 1, you get to go around the Citadel, and there's a lot of different people you interact with, like that Sha'ira or whatever, like the consulate, whatever. That was pretty interesting, actually, because it requires you to go to different areas of the Citadel and meet with different people to like sort of help them resolve their issue. That's just one example. And there's also that other touching mission with that the Indian guy with his wife, his dead wife or whatever, that the military wouldn't allow them to allow the body to be returned to him for like for whatever reason. It had something to do with like the death, but that's besides the point. Just missions like that really helped add to the overall experience of the first two Mass Effect games. And in this game, there's not really a whole lot of those sorts of missions in this game. It's mainly just fetch quest missions, in terms of just going to a different galactic region or whatever, a different system, and then bringing back a trinket or some sort of object, delivering it to the person who you overheard in some area of the Citadel, and receiving war assets possibly, or reputation, or money, which I don't even think is that big, because you don't really spend your money all that much. to be honest, unless you're buying weapon upgrades, but that's a different thing. But that's basically it, and I just didn't like that at all. Alright, the second point that I'm going to mention is the fact that your war assets don't really matter outside of being a number. And essentially, you can't really, another problem, a minor problem, is that you can't really view them outside of re-entering your ship. So if you're on the Citadel, it's kind of annoying to have to go through your ship and go through that damn security thing, whatever, which is what I'm going to talk about in a second. But yeah, there's only one place you can view them, right? And second of all, like, they don't really matter. They're just a number. They don't really affect anything. As soon as you get the minimum amount of war asset number, like your EMS or whatever, you can just go straight to the ending, and it won't really affect the ending because the endings are all essentially the same. They produce the same cutscene, and they don't really affect the ending at all. So essentially, all of that effort that you put into with those this obviously pertains to the side missions as well, because a lot of the side missions like add up and accumulate and add into the grand scheme in terms of the total amount of war assets. But basically all that effort is essentially wasted because it doesn't really make as much of an impact on the ending as it probably should, considering the amount of effort that you put into gaining them and achieving them and earning them. Like, the war assets are just nothing more than a number, really. Like, there's nothing, they're not useful at all, and it's really not worth scouring and searching out every single system in the game to acquire more war assets, because it's just a waste of time, to be honest with you. I had to learn that the hard way. But I'm just very, very frustrated by that point, because it could have been so much more. I mean, it just seems like, for something that's a big focus of the game, this whole war asset thing, it just should have had more of an impact on the end. It should have been worth a little bit more. It should have been more valuable. It should have been more significant in the grand scheme of the game, I thought. My next point pertains to the security checkpoint, which I briefly mentioned in the last point I made. Basically, this is that security checkpoint on the main level of the Normandy, the second level, whatever, the one where you could view your map, the one where the war assets are viewable. And basically, it's just a huge waste of time. It just wastes, 10 seconds of your time at least, like every time you go through that. And once you accumulate that throughout the course of the entire game, that probably is a good 20-30 minutes of your time wasted, depending on how long you play the game for. And it just doesn't make any sense. Like, for example, if Shepard walks through there, you shouldn't have to walk through the same damn thing again. Especially I tested it once. If you walk through it and then you walk through it again, you still have to do it. It doesn't matter. Like, why would they have to do it twice, even though you passed once? I mean, it's so stupid. It's just an unnecessary aspect that really bogs down the pacing of the game. Not necessarily the pacing of the entire game as a whole, but just sort of, it's just an annoying thing that really shouldn't be there, if you know what I mean. It doesn't add anything to the game. It's not beneficial in any way. I don't understand the purpose of it, really. I guess it's just like, I guess some sort of security checkpoint for weapons or something. I don't know, but like, wouldn't they have already shouldn't have had that, like, in order for a person to enter the Normandy in the first place, and why would they have it there? I have no idea, but it's just a really annoying feature that I personally don't like at all, and I think they should not have added it at all to the game. I think it was stupid. It was really stupid and annoying throughout the course of the game. Alright, so the next point I'm going to talk about is about auto-dialogue, again, like I mentioned in my previous video. And this is when Shepard is sort of moving around the Normandy, and basically, instead of triggering a cutscene when you press A or whatever nearby a person to talk to them, it's just all auto-dialogue, so there's no up-close camera view with like a bunch of dialogue wheel options or whatever. So basically, it's just a bunch of increase in auto-dialogue where your character just stands there, and where you can still move and interact while the person's talking to you, and Shepard has his automated responses, his triggered responses that you have no you have no say in at all. And I found that really annoying, considering how the previous Mass Effect game, Mass Effect 2, prided itself on being able to interact with the various members of your crew throughout the course of the game. They're all different hiding spots and stuff like that. And you could talk to them and ask them a variety of different questions, pertaining to their race or their thoughts on the mission or stuff like that. And it was really interesting. It was rich, and it just sort of added a whole new layer to the game in terms of the characters. And in here, for example, like the Prothean Javik is a perfect example. Like, you would naturally have a lot of questions about his race, and you're not really able to ask them. You're only able to ask him once about that. Like, there should always be, like in Mass Effect 2, there should always be some sort of default questions you could ask. You could ask the people, your squad members, because essentially Mass Effect 2, yes, like after a while, you know, like your options would deplete. Like there would be a certain dialogue sequence that you wouldn't have before. You know, like for example, if you're talking to Thane, you was talking about like his assassination thing or whatever. Like eventually, once you go through like each character had like 3 or 4 specific talking sequences, I believe. I could be wrong about that. I don't vividly remember, but like you would talk to them, and eventually they would be depleted, so there would be no more unique conversations that you could have with them. So then they're just like whenever you talk to them or press A near them or whatever, they would just you have your default dialogue wheel with your default questions that always remain the same. And I wish they had implemented that in this title. I really wish they had, just because, like, why would you take something like that out of this game when it added so much to Mass Effect 2. I do not understand that. I mean, aside from just being lazy, like how would they think that benefits the product as a whole to just eliminate entirely that aspect that I and a lot of other people enjoyed immensely and spent a lot of hours talking to all those characters. And here, like, Shepard is hardly your character anymore when he just you know, auto dialogue talking while you're moving around the Normandy. It's just really annoying. My next point is very similar to the last one I made in that there's a lot of auto dialogue during the cutscenes as well. Especially like, I mean, it just felt like there's too much auto dialogue when there shouldn't have been. Like, for example, I already told you about the introduction to the game in my last video in terms of there being like a lot of auto dialogue, and Shepard wasn't even allowed to say anything until like 5 minutes or so into the introduction, as opposed to Mass Effect, as opposed to the first 2 Mass Effect games actually, because in Mass Effect 1, Commander Shepard didn't say anything prior to you being able to select a dialogue option for him, because that was when he was standing behind Joker and the other pilot, or just Joker, I think, or Joker and Kaidan, I think it was. Basically, like, after like he was talking with Anderson or whatever, so that was when you got to talk there. And then in Mass Effect 2, that it was when you were fixing something while the collectors were attacking your ship or whatever. So it just seems like Mass Effect 3 broke all like these gameplay trends and just sort of like the storytelling themes and stuff from the previous games. It just another example of BioWare just sort of breaking off and changing a lot of the stuff that made the previous games that were established in the previous games, I should say. And that's definitely a negative aspect to this game. I mean, I can't see how anyone would disagree with me there. It just seems like Mass Effect 3 is taking a lot of the stuff out of the previous games and just not benefiting, and it's just not benefiting, and it shows in this game. That's why I think Mass Effect 3 is the weakest one in this whole damn series. Alright, so my next point is about how your EMS, your essential military asset or strength or whatever, depletes after a certain amount of time. Now, like I said before, they added multiplayer to the game, right? I have a big problem with that, like I said before. I'm not going to reiterate that here. But basically, not only is it included in the game, but it forces you to play multiplayer to get the so-called best ending, or to unlock the most amount of options for the final part of the game. And not only in addition to that are you forced to play it for a set amount of time, but you're forced to continuously play the multiplayer because your essential military strength, which only increases by playing the multiplayer. If you don't know what I mean, basically your total military assets, like the total amount of your assets that you gather throughout the course of the game, basically your essential military strength, or your galactic readiness, that's what I'm trying to say here, is 50%, which means your essential military strength is 50% of your total amount of war assets. So essentially when you increase your galactic readiness, you increase your military, your total, no, not your total military strength, your effective military strength, because it becomes a greater, increases to a greater percentage of your total military strength. That's basically the premise behind it. And essentially, after a while, I don't know the exact rate of decay in terms of the galactic readiness, but after a while, maybe like, I don't know, after a day or something, like your galactic readiness starts to drop or to decrease by a couple percentage points, or by a few percentage points. So that basically forces you to continue playing multiplayer in order to get the best ending. And that just seems ludicrous to me. I mean, that's stupid to continually force people to play the damn multiplayer mode. I mean, it's bad enough that it was included in the game to begin with. I mean, I would have been fine, like, if they had spent enough, like the prime amount of effort to the single player campaign and then added a multiplayer, because I probably wouldn't have played it. Otherwise, I'm like, oh, who cares, you know? It doesn't negatively impact the game. But here, it actually does, because first of all, they obviously spent time on their multiplayer development when they should have spent time in the single-player campaign. But besides that point, it negatively impacts the game when you're forced to play another mode to get that impacts the story. And that's just, and not only to that degree, but it continuously you're forced to do that to maintain your galactic readiness and to maintain the amount of essential military strength number you have in order to get the best ending to the game. In order for it to, you know, because it directly affects the single player experience, and that to me is just wrong in every sense of the word, because that just shouldn't happen. Multiplayer should not directly affect the single player, especially in this type of single player role-playing game where all the fans don't really want the multiplayer. They want the single player experience, and they don't want to have to be forced to continuously play another mode to, you know, have a positive outcome, or, you know, that's in theory to the single player campaign. Another problem I have, and this is sort of a minor thing because it pertains to the multiplayer itself, I just personally don't think the multiplayer structure is as well crafted as it could have been and should have been, technically, because just like there's all these, you know, there's like 5 or 6 or 7, I don't know how many different classes there are, you know, like the soldier class, the vanguard, the whatever the hell, I don't remember all of them, but basically there's different classes, right? And basically you have to buy, you earn points to buy like better weapons through these different packs. Like there's like a Spectre pack, an advanced Spectre pack, and there's like a veteran pack or something. And basically you have to keep buying those for each damn class. And basically, not only that, it's all randomized apparently, so you don't even know what weapon you're going to get, what thing you're going to get. It's just all by chance. And that's the main problem I have with this thing, is this whole chance thing. Yes, and the thing is, you get to pay for it too. Like, why would you ever want to pay for something? That's like in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, like being able to pay to get to level 75, or getting paid to prestige all the way up to like the 10th prestige or something if you pay like $100 or something. I mean, in general, that just sort of ruins the entire point of just earning something. You know, I don't know if you know exactly what I mean. Like for example, when I was playing Saints Row the Third, the first thing I did was turn on all the cheats or whatever, because that's sort of an exception, I guess, especially in Saints Row 2. But in Saints Row the Third, I should say that I wasn't very satisfied playing the game Invincible. Like I was more satisfied when, you know, ranking my guy up to like level 50 or whatever, you know, and then getting all like the invincibility after that, because I felt like I earned something. It's more rewarding, I think, to earn something, you know. Instead of like just getting it for free, because then, or just, you know, getting it instantly, just because you don't value it quite as much. At least for me, I don't know. That's just my standpoint. That's just my view on that. But still, I mean, sorry for the Saints Row the Third thing. That was a little bit off topic, but my main complaint is that it's all sort of randomized, like the weapons or the weapon upgrades, the weapon implants or whatever, and I also don't think like the specific weapon abilities or whatever, like those attributes or whatever, like are very well organized. It's sort of confusing. So that's just sort of a minor complaint. I don't really care about the multiplayer that much, just because I don't really play it. I only play the single player. But yeah, that's just sort of a thing that sort of annoyed me. But it's not by any means a major part. It's not really what I care about. Alright, so my next point jumps us back into the single-player story mode. I apologize if this, like the subject matter here appears to be a bit randomized because the list is in no particular order here. This is all like this list I'm reading off of in terms of my complaints is all sort of, they all came off the top of my head here, so they're not really in any structural order here. But anyway, this complaint has to do with how certain characters choose not to join Shepard. And basically, by these characters, I mean specifically Grunt, Zaid, the other downloadable character, the female thief, Kasumi, and what was the other one? Oh, and Samara. And basically, like, these characters just don't really have much of an excuse to really not join your your team. They essentially become war assets or whatever. And I think that's kind of pretty damn lame in my opinion. Instead of having them as actual genuine characters to the game. Because, like, they just don't really have an excuse, like, some of them, especially, like, someone like Grunt. Like, it's implied that he sort of joins your team, you rescue him or whatever, like, he almost dies. They set it up for him to die in that scene on that random planet, whatever, where the Rachni are killing him, and he fends him off or whatever, and he comes back, and it would have been awesome for him to be able to join your squad after that, because I need I felt like I needed a Krogan, I needed a strong companion, a strong squad mate, not only in combat, but just sort of like as a just like as a personality on the ship, just like you kind of had Rex, but he wasn't really in your squad because you never actually fought with him. I don't think he was never really part of your squad at all. He was just sort of there in the story, like, so it would have been nice to have some for Grunt to be able to join. And basically, it doesn't explain how after his injury, like it doesn't explain how, like, he wasn't. I don't believe he was actually in the if you visit the Normandy's med bay or whatever after that happened, I don't think he was there. It just doesn't explain at all how. It just sort of covered it all up. So I'm just like, what the hell? And that was really cheap, in my opinion. Zaid is just sort of, I don't really give a shit about Zaid, to be honest with you, because I don't really like him. But he sort of has no reason to not join your squad. I mean, I remember from Mass Effect 2, he was pretty useful in combat, I think. Wouldn't have hurt to have him on board. And Kasumi, like, the reason she says, like, she doesn't join is because she wants to, like, go into that little digital memory box thing, whatever, and look at their videos, their sex videos of KG or whatever the hell, like their love videos or whatever, instead of joining you. I mean, why the hell does she need to watch that shit on the Citadel instead of being able to watch it on Normandy? I understand that. I mean, that's important because that's a loved one that she lost, right? It's good to have memories. It's like looking at a picture of someone you love, except obviously more vivid in that case. But still, it's someone she loves, she cares about, she wants to remember them before, like, the end of the world or whatever. That's understandable, but why the hell can't she do that on the Normandy? What's so special about doing it on the Citadel as opposed to being able to do that on the Normandy? Because you could still do that damn thing on the Normandy while being able to fight. That's pretty stupid. And Samara, like, she obviously is, it's an option for her to die, but if you choose to save her for some bullshit reason or whatever, she writes you an email or something and says that she wouldn't be effective on your ship or something because she has, like, greater duties to do or something. I didn't really buy it. I didn't really buy it. It would have been better for her to say that in person as opposed to just leaving your ship mysteriously and then just sending you an email later about it. I didn't really like that very much, and I felt like it's just cheap for these characters to not be able to be a part of your squad. Now, here's what I understand though: is Jack, she has her school, right? She's instructing those biotic teenagers or whatever to fight in battle, so that I understand. And Thane, obviously, I understand the most because he's in critical condition. He probably can't even afford to leave the hospital for very long at all because he's on the brink of death. He has the Keppel syndrome or whatever. I forget, some sort of syndrome that it's hard for him to breathe because there's no oxygen in his blood cells or something. But he's in pretty critical condition, so I understand him. But it's just disappointing to not have. I just sort of felt that some of these characters not joining you were really backed up by a solid and thorough explanation in terms of why they're not joining you. I felt that was a negative. Okay, my next complaint has to do with plot holes throughout the course of the game. So, basically, the first one is when the Citadel is moved to the Sol system near Earth. They don't really explain how that's possible. Obviously, the Reapers are heavily concentrated. So, actually, that's not a really point. But anyway, I don't understand how the Reapers can move the Citadel, a massive structure like that, so quickly. In a matter of hours or days. It doesn't even really explain how much time has passed between like when you leave from the Citadel to when you find out that it has been moved on the Cerberus base. It doesn't really explain that, but basically they obviously wouldn't be able to physically push it. That would require hundreds of Reapers probably. The Reapers are not that physically strong. They don't to move something like that massive, hundreds of times their size. I mean, yes, they are skyscraper tall, but like the Reapers are nowhere near the size of the actual Citadel itself. It would take hundreds of Reapers to do that, and I don't really know how many Reapers exist. Probably, I would estimate around 1,000, maybe, or maybe more. I don't know, but obviously that would take a lot of Reapers to do that, and the Citadel is in a different. The original location of the Citadel throughout the whole course of the series is in a separate system than the Sol system, so that would take years to do that. So essentially the only other option is for it to go through a mass relay, and I don't understand, because that's such a large object, how it could even fit through the relay, essentially. So like essentially the Citadel can go through the mass relay. I don't know. They don't explain it. I'm assuming that's the explanation there, but I'm not entirely sure. So that's sort of leaving you guessing. It just wasn't explained as. That's something that should have been explained in more depth and in more detail than it was in the game. The next thing is the structure of the temple on Thessia. So essentially, like it's evidenced when Kai Lang shoots the pillars or the support beams or pillars down, and there is a very thin layer of floor in the temple, and the rest is just like a plunge all the way down hundreds or thousands of feet below, beneath the in front of the beacon or whatever. They're just like a mass of just like an abyss, a pit of just darkness where you could just die instantly. So I understand that's not really very realistic from an architectural perspective, in terms of like how an architect can think that's a good idea in terms of safety to have such a thin layer of floor or ground in that temple. That doesn't make any sense. That shouldn't have. That's why I think that part where Kai Lang does that is very implausible, because that really wouldn't have happened. They obviously should have normally, if there's that was just sort of a thing that was overlooked. They obviously would have designed it so there would have been more, at least a thicker floor, if not like, since they discovered it, they obviously built the temple around the beacon, right? So why the hell would they just build such a thin floor there? They would normally just fill it like thick, so between the level that Shepard and the other people were at to view it, and like the bottom of the beacon all the way down there would be filled with cement and other metal or metallic stuff or whatever, just objects or materials to construct a full flooring from those thousands of feet. That's what I would expect. That's what any normal person would expect from that. And even forgiving that fact, how the hell did Kai Lang know that would happen? Any person would think that floor is well supported, so having a pillar, a couple ton pillar crushed down on it wouldn't really affect the floor, because the floor is just so damn thick that it wouldn't affect it. So how the hell did Cerberus know, or how did Kai Lang know that would work on them? Did he know that? We don't know. That's just another thing. And now, the final thing is during the Kai Lang versus Thane battle scene, which I thought was pretty cool, but there's a lot of, stuff that was, whatever. Basically, like, at the end of it, whatever, was when both of them were charging at each other at the end of that fight. So how the hell did Kai Lang dodge those bullets, essentially? Because, Thane was shooting at him with his gun, and Kai Lang wasn't actually dodging, he just kept on running. So, and obviously, it's impossible for Thane, an assassin such as him, even in such a bad condition that he is, would not miss a target blindly several damn times less than like 10 or 15 feet in front of him. I don't buy that at all. Thane would not blatantly miss his target like that. You know, I mean, that just makes the whole thing implausible, in my opinion. Like, Thane should not have died based on just that. You know, I mean, I'm fine with Thane dying because it was, you know, him, Legion, and Mordin's death scenes were all very powerful, emotional, and impacting towards the audience, the gamer, or whatever, the player. And basically, I would have been fine with that, but, you know, it's just, at least give me something plausible, like a good way of showing how he died, instead of Kai Lang magically just or the bullets magically just disappearing like in thin air, as if they didn't even affect Kai Lang at all, despite him not dodging it at all. So what the hell? I mean, I don't understand that at all, you know?
Another complaint I have towards this game that I didn't really mention earlier is the quest book, the log book thing. You know, the menu, your journal, I should say, the journal that you use to track what your current objective is and where all the side missions and primary objectives are displayed. Well, basically, every time you exit that and then try and reboot it and, you know, reselect your journal, the screen sends you to the bottom of the journal for some unknown reason. So basically, I'm just left to scroll all the way back up to the top and just waste another 10 seconds to figure out what the hell my objective is. Why does it automatically, by default, bring me back to the bottom of that? It doesn't make any sense at all. I just find that to be another annoying feature in this game. Another complaint I have is with this whole reputation system established in the game. Basically, I have no idea why they decided to add this feature, and I don't really see what effect it truly has on the game as a whole. Basically, it sort of almost replaced Paragon or Renegade points, because oftentimes after conversations, like if I do the Paragon or Renegade option, like I expect to have, you know, +2 Paragon points or whatever, but instead it gives me just reputation points. From playing the game, do not fully understand at all what this reputation points actually count for at all. I don't understand that at all. If it's somehow explained, I have no idea what they're used for, and also it makes a lot of the activities that you find around the Citadel, like supporting another person, you know, like those things like where there's two people arguing about something randomly on the Citadel or even on your ship, and you have to like support them, or like you have to choose between who to support. It doesn't really make much of a difference, because all it does is boost up your reputation, which I have no idea what the purpose is. I mean, they seem to be replacing Paragon and Renegade points, so what the hell are they in there for? It doesn't make any bit of sense to me. So that's just another thing that it just makes the addition of those little favoring sequences when you find two people arguing entirely pointless, when the reward for even partaking in that little side activity thing is useless.
Okay, now the final aspect, if you're bearing with me throughout this whole video, that I'm going to talk about, is the lack of choices that really carried over from the previous games into Mass Effect 3. Yes, the main sort of choice is just basically whoever survives from that suicide mission, because obviously the whole series is all about characters, but specifically Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 sort of emphasizes the characters a lot more, and basically, you know, like obviously the characters make a difference, because it would drastically change the story. Well, it wouldn't actually. It would change. I actually don't know how much it would change the storyline, to be honest, because I had all my characters, including the 2 downloadable content characters, survive from the Mass Effect 2 suicide mission. So I don't know how drastically it would affect the actual core structure of the story. I would guess not very much, but it would affect the story in a different way, because those are your friends, those are your companions, those are the people that you've developed relationships with over the course of 2 games, or 3 games if you want to say, and having them absent, or some of those characters, like for example Garrus, who I think is the best, who's like one of the main characters in the game. Like the main characters I think are Shepard, Anderson, Garrus, Liara, and I guess Tali is probably the 5th, or whatever, how the hell characters that was. She's like the 5th main, and like Liara is like the 4th, and Garrus is like the second or third. That's kind of interesting between whether Captain Anderson can be considered a major character, because I think he's the most important, one of the most important ones, probably the second most important to Shepard, because he's like his mentor or whatever. Because Shepard is his protege, but he doesn't get as much screen time. He doesn't get as much time in the game as compared to Garrus and Liara and all the other people. But anyway, that's besides the point. It is basically, besides the characters, like, I think the mission on Tuchanka was a prime example of how it could affect the storyline, because basically your choices might differ if Rex didn't survive from the first game. Like, you might not want to cure the genophage because of that, or if Mordin didn't survive from the suicide mission, how would that change if there is a cure even possible for the genophage? That was a prime example of how different choices can affect the storyline and plot of the game, especially even if you did have both of those characters survive, you can have it so you don't cure the genophage and then Rex comes after you. Like, there's heavy repercussions from that mission based on your decisions made in the previous games, and that's why that mission was my favorite from a storytelling perspective out of the whole Mass Effect 3 game, because it fully implemented choices from the previous game into it so that they actually had significance, that they actually mattered. And that's why I like that mission so much. Now, for any other choices, like whether the Council survived. Actually, I think that might be good. The only other major one is whether the Council survived or not, because that might be. I don't know if the human. I don't know if the normal Council died, then there's going to be a human Council, right? So I guess Kai Lang would assassinate the human Council, or you'd be protecting them. I don't know, because they weren't mentioned in Mass Effect 2 because I killed the Council. One of my save files for Mass Effect 1 had me killing the Council or whatever, and the human Council in Mass Effect 2 didn't want to see me or whatever. Like, it wasn't an option to communicate with them in any way. So I don't know if that would change in Mass Effect 3. If that save file continued, they might appear. I don't know. That might be different. I have no idea as to that, because I didn't have that save file. But besides those two, any other choice, minor or major, didn't have any impact on that. For example, a major choice at the end of Mass Effect 2, whether you destroyed the Collector base or if you, had the EMP, whatever, to save it. I understand. Like, I read up from the Mass Effect 3 wiki on Priority Earth, the final mission of Mass Effect 3, that choice does actually matter, but it doesn't really. Because basically what matters is at the ending whether the option to control the Reapers or the destroy option comes up. That's what happens as a result of whichever option you chose for Mass Effect 2. But the player has no idea that actually happened. Like, you would not know that whichever choice pops up, or if both choices pop up, then it doesn't even matter what the hell you picked for that option for Mass Effect 2. But the player has no idea that whichever option comes up is a direct result of that. It's not made clear. It's not made apparent. And I felt that, like, it's something. It should have been something more more blatant than that. The audience, the player, whatever, should have an idea that saving or destroying the Collector ship, or the Collector base, actually mattered in Mass Effect 3, and I don't believe it did. Like, that's just not a real. You know what I'm getting here? I'm sorry if I'm not explaining this in a very precise and concise manner, but that's what I'm trying to say here. The Collector, destroying or saving the Collector base from Mass Effect 2 did not have any severe impact on the game that the player knew about without reading that article. Like, you didn't know. Like, I thought it didn't have any effect on it, and I realized it technically did if there's only one option. So essentially, technically it actually only has an effect if only one option comes up. And even then, like, it really doesn't even matter, because the endings are all the same, but whatever. So essentially it doesn't. But that's my problem. That's my problem, is that most of your other choices really did not matter. Like, for example, even all the side missions from the previous games did not matter, and like there's no epilogue to it. Actually, technically there is, but it was a shitty one. But none of your choices, small or large, aside from maybe the Council and obviously whichever characters survived to be included in Mass Effect 3. Besides those two things, I don't really see any other choices. I can't even really remember vividly right now an example of any of those other choices, but any of those choices really I don't think matter. Like if they did, I don't know. It wasn't apparent to me while I played through the game, and that is a really big fault in my opinion of Mass Effect 3. Now, as a game as a whole, yes, I do think it's a good game. I think it's good. Like as a whole, like if Mass Effect 1, Mass Effect 2 didn't exist, let's just say like as the quality of the game itself, I would rate it a 9, 9.5 even. But it just based on itself. But based on what was already given to us and the high quality of Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2, I expected better than what Mass Effect 3 offered in many in the categories that I just outlined for you. I expected a lot better. Really, I did. I expected a lot more based on not only in terms of the ending, which sucked, but just in terms of the game overall. It shouldn't have axed out a lot of the gameplay and narrative aspects that made the first two games so fulfilling and enjoyable. And that's why I would say that Mass Effect 3, even if it did have, a perfect ending, like a well thought out, well developed, well written ending, like Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2, it still would be the weakest one in my opinion. Out of all three games, for the numerous reasons that I listed in these two videos. So that's about it. I've wasted enough of your time. This video is way too goddamn long, longer than I wanted it to be. But hopefully I got my point across in that I don't even know if I'm going to be buying another BioWare game after this, just because they fucked up so badly on this shit that I don't like in many ways that. I don't think I'm going to. This is almost like an example of Saints Row the Third. I didn't think Saints Row the Third was a particularly good game. It was fun. On its own, it would be good, but compared to something like Saints Row 2, it ain't jack shit. Like, they just got lazy. I mean, that Saints Row the Third and Mass Effect 3, both the third game in the trilogy, both fucked up in massive ways. I mean, I thought well, actually, it's worse than Saints Row the Third, but Mass Effect 3 at least stayed true to most of what it was in the previous two games. It stayed true to the themes in the previous games for the most part. It still had the Mass Effect spark. It still had the Mass Effect, heart to it. But the Saints Row thing is a different conversation. But anyway, yes, Mass Effect 3 is a good game. I think it's a good game. It's well made, but it didn't have as much heart. It didn't have as much passion. It didn't have as much time and effort put into it. Like it felt rushed to me in a lot of different aspects. For all this stuff to be axed out, it felt rushed, and I think it shows in a lot of different ways. And I wish that wasn't happening. I mean, I think Mass Effect as a trilogy has probably the best story in any game since Kingdom Hearts from several years back. I think both of those games are just their stories are so fulfilling and rich and deep that they're. Honestly, they've been unrivaled from any. Mass Effect has been unrivaled in terms of its story from any other modern game on the Xbox 360. I mean, the only other game I would say is Kingdom Hearts, but that was on the Kingdom Hearts games, but that was on the previous console. But those are the only two games that would rival it. But yeah, so basically this video is done. I'm sorry for wasting so much of your time. But I just had to get my points across, and I'm going to be talking about the ending in my next video, which is going to be a shitload longer, but about what can be done about the ending of the game. So thank you for watching this massively overlong